So, hi everyone. Planes do not crash. So this is a fact. They do not collide with each other. You might be wondering why. Well, the first reason is because there is something which is called air traffic control. Because planes are controlled by humans that give them clearances to avoid colliding in mid-air. Normally, they get different altitude, so they don't crash. Nice. This worked until the end of the 80s, where a lot of traffic started coming on, and humans started making mistakes. So engineers did their thing, and they fixed this problem with another system, an automated one, which is called the TCAS. So the TCAS works with what's called a secondary radar. A secondary radar is when two planes coordinate among each other by sending signals and replying to them. So basically having a communication. And TCAS works because planes talk with each other, they get the altitude and the distance they're at, and if they figure out that they're going to collide, they either do a traffic advisory, so you get a warning in the cockpit, or a resolution advisory. You get an order in the cockpit which is going to be coordinated. So one plane is going to climb, the other one is going to descend, no one is going to crash, and we are all going to be happy. And this has worked wonderfully well. And this has never been attacked by anyone. But the 1st of March 2025, in Washington, DCA, so Washington Regional Airport, something happened. And this something is that a bunch of planes, throughout 3 hours, had a bunch of TA and RA alerts without seeing anything on their way to the airport. And no one has explained to us why this has happened. But we can look at the data, because aviation is nice, because we have a bunch of open sources that you can look at. The main one is ADS-B, which a lot of people collect. So what happens if you take a look at the ADS-B data? So you should know one thing, is if two planes do have a resolution advisory, this resolution advisory is also sent to the tower, so that the tower can see that something bad is happening, and they can reroute planes around where the problem is. So if you take a look at this data from that particular date, the information that you do get is that 10 aircraft had a problem, and 3 of them even had to abort their landing. And that day was a very good day with very good visibility. And everyone else reported that they weren't seeing this obstacle, this ghost plane, either via radio or visually. Everyone reported, I see nothing out of my... I see only something on my displays, but I don't see it with my eyes. Also, this intruder, so this other aircraft, was at 700 meters every time. So a fixed plane in the sky at an altitude that no one has seen before. And this intruder was a special one, because it was an intruder that was using a technology which is older than the one used for TCAS, actually, which is called Mode C. A mode that is used by, the small planes with just the prop on the front? Those use Mode C. So this sounded very strange from the get-go. And so we wanted to figure out what was going on. There are 2 options. So on the bottom, you can see every plane which had a problem reported where they estimated the other intruder to be. So you see the circles. So you see that those circles, if the intruder was fixed on the ground somewhere, those circles would intersect somewhere. But instead, this looks like someone followed the aircraft as they were landing. So you have 2 choices. One is that was another aircraft, but no one has seen anything. Or you had someone on the ground. But how is it possible to have something on the ground producing this effect to 8 planes at once? So the 2 questions are, is it possible to inject false aircraft using that mode, Mode C? And the second one is, if it was possible, where it was the transmitter? Well, so TCAS uses Mode S instead of Mode C, but it's also compatible with Mode C. So if you are on the ground and you're in a fixed spot, the way with which you can appear to be moving is by changing the distance that the TCAS measures. And the only way to do so is to fool the system by responding a little bit earlier with respect to when you are expected to reply. So If you are the first plane, you're going to send P1, P2, and P3. If you are the second plane, you're going to discover that this was sent to you, wait 3 microseconds, respond to that, and then the aircraft will monitor and measure by dividing by the speed of light to get the distance in between you and the other plane. So is this possible to appear closer than you are? The response is yes. There is an article from me, Martin, Vincent, that was shown that this is possible with mode S, but it was never shown with mode C. So how can you do that? Well, this is one of the first contributions that we did with this work. We settled down and we took a look. And there are a bunch of ways. So the first one is we replicate exactly what we did with the mode S article. So the thing that you do is, instead of replying after waiting 3 microseconds, you reply immediately after you have received P1 and P2. And this allows you to appear 800 meters closer with respect to the original one. But 800 meters is not a lot. I mean, planes are fast. So we discovered another thing. So if you take a look in the standards, the only way with which you can discover if the other plane is asking your altitude or your name is the distance in between P1, P2, and P3. So what can you do? If you listen for the interrogation, you discover P1 and P2, and after 8 microseconds you hear nothing, this means that the other aircraft is asking you your altitude. So you can start replying there, because you hear silence. So you discover which interrogation you received. And this allows you to zero out 2.4 kilometers of distance. This starts getting interesting, because you can appear at distance 0 with any aircraft you want in a circle of 2.4 kilometers. Finally, there is another option, which is you receive P1 and you just reply immediately. But you also have another problem, which is now you appear in 2 spots at the same time. You appear at the spot for the first interrogation and at the spot of the second interrogation. So you appear as 2 airplanes instead of 1. So we wanted to test this. So is this compatible with Washington? So in theory, this works. In practice, what we built was we bought this RF sock, which is an FPGA with an RF front end attached to it. And we tested it with ramp tester, which is the thing that you use to test if your airplane TCAS works correctly. And we discovered that besides not having enough power to be a real airplane, our system actually can get confused for a real TCAS system. So the attacks, as we devised, can work. So we responded to the first question. So is it possible to do an attack over mode C? Yes. The second one is, where did the attacks in Washington probably come from? Well, the main idea that I want to give you is that every recording that we do have about the attacker is approximately at this bearing and approximately at this range. This range, you know, I've shown you that you can change it a little bit. The bearing is imprecise, so it moves around side to side because it's calculated by radio direction finding, which is never very accurate. So the idea is we built a system that is based on a technique which is called sequential Monte Carlo, which means all of these measurements are not very precise on their own. But if you have 110 of them and you think that they belong to the same phenomena, probably some areas are more likely than others. So we built this system where we spread a bunch of particles around, and over time, we shift these particles to where it's most likely that the attacker was. Of course, we couldn't test just directly on Washington, because first time you need to discover if the system works. So we did 300,000 tests of scenarios which are comparable, and the method works, and it gives you 2 informations. The first one is if the transmitter is mobile, so if the other transmitter is moving, instead of getting the attacker is here, you get an error. You get particles spread all over the place. So you discover if the attacker was mobile or fixed. The second thing is with 95% confidence interval, there's an error on the slides, we can discover the error about the real position of the attacker within 1 kilometer of distance, which might sound like a lot, but that square that you see over there, where the area happened, is 140 kilometers squared. So, and the average execution time is very fast, even if it's written in Python. So I gave you the intuition. How it works in practice is that you start with a bunch of particles, which are the things in green, that are all across spread out throughout the area of the attack. Then after a bunch of measurements, the system starts to converge. So you see that there is an area which is more likely, so one where the particles are. And finally, after a bunch of measurements, you get the picture on the right, where you see that all of the particles are clustered near the red X, which is the correct position for the attacker. So this is inside of our simulations, of course, so you have the ground truth. What happens if you apply this simulation to the case which happened in Washington? Well, so the source of the attacks is with 94% of probability lying within an area that is known as area P56 Bravo, which is an area close by to the Potomac River inside of Washington. And it's very consistent with a fixed attacker. So why do we care? Well, the two reasons. The first one is that this is probably the first ever cyber attack carried out via radio against a plane in history. The second reason about why do we care is that if you take a look at that area and you wanted to enforce by police to interrupt these disruptions, you would have needed to search 140 kilometers squared of area, which is a large-scale police operation. And instead, if you use a system like ours that tries to detect a probable area of intervention, that area would have become, after just the first two encounters, so after 30 minutes approximately, 4 square kilometers. And 4 square kilometers, you can send police to search there. It's not like searching an entire region. So the takeaways are that these attacks have probably happened in real life, and we should be prepared by using the data which we already have to study them. So if you want to do, here there is a website, so you can play with the small game that I showed you before, and there are a bunch of other details and our data set and the methodology and whatever. And I'm looking forward to your questions.
Questions from the audience?
Thank you. If I understood correctly, TCAS array is non-encrypted.
Yeah, it has never been.
In gliding, we use a system called FLARM, you're probably aware, and I think that is encrypted. Would encrypting TCAS array be a solution?
Yeah, that would switch the problem from the link not being encrypted to a PKI problem. Because the main problem with all of these systems is that TCAS is regulated by a UN level negotiation. So if you had to set up a PKI that every plane in the planet will need to adhere to, it's going to be complicated. The second problem is that these systems are plugged by background capabilities. Because, for instance, in this case, they already used a legacy protocol. But since it's a collision avoidance system, you cannot just say, oh, that plane is not using the correct public key. I'm going to reject it and crash into it. You're always going to be, let's say, on the safe side. So we have this intersection in between safety and cybersecurity that is not favorable to cybersecurity. So that's the main issue with cryptography schema inside of these kind of protocols. It's going to happen in 40 years, probably. But
then just as a follow-up, what would be a solution to this issue?
The solution to this issue is probably going to be revolving around exploiting data which we do already have. So right now, we do not have a lot of trust inside of, let's say, radio direction finding equipment. But one of the ways with which you could figure out if someone is behaving erratically is figuring out in 3D where the signal is coming from. If that's reasonable with respect to what you are seeing. This will not mitigate all classes of attack, but a bunch of them. And also, there are a bunch of protocols which are called distance bounding protocols that give you bounds so that someone cannot preempt responses like I've shown you. So those two solutions.
So the elephant in the room, I mean, this made international headlines, right? So the incident there, particularly since before that helicopter actually crashed into a plane at the same airport. And it also, made it to the FAA here and the House committees, and everyone wanted to know what's going on. So did any of that come back to you? I mean, there's a very quick investigation, less than a year after the incident. You have a paper published here that's very impressive for sure, considering the lead times for writing and publishing. But yeah, what happened during, let's say, disclosure?
Yeah, so we are the original authors, also together with Martin, of the CVE published for TCAS. And inside of the CVE published for TCAS, there is a phrase that says, this has not ever been exploited and is unlikely to be exploited outside of a laboratory. And we reached out first to ask them for a reevaluation of this to CISA. And they are currently investigating together with the FAA on the happenings of that day. We have received very recently, I believe last week, another email on this. So there is a bunch of back and forth to figure out whether to switch this vulnerability from the CVE directory and also to the exploited vulnerabilities directory, or if something else was at play. So a bunch of, let's say, interest from the institutions. So there has been an institutional response to this. But it's still unfolding because, as you said, it happened also quickly. And
if I recall correctly, in the news, Marco Rubio said the Secret Service was likely involved somewhere on record. So,
well, we do have a likely position for where they transmitted, but that position does not give us who did it, because that could be Martin with a backpack trying to imply something about the US government. So we do not know.
I still need to leave this country, so let's cut it here. Cut away here. Further questions from the audience on this topic?
Thanks for your talk. And I could see that from several hacking conferences or other security talks that ADSB or some flight-related protocols are usually unencrypted and unprotected, and also sometimes drones on the like airports are being a problem. So is there any generic radio surveillance system run by maybe some airport to detect such attacks in general?
Yeah, the main problem that you do have with spectrum monitoring is that spectrum monitoring is extremely expensive, namely storage-wise. Because in order to discover what was actually happening in the air, normally you need multiple sources so that you can find out the phase and do direction finding, and then you need to sample at very high rates. So those systems can be afforded by large airports, but there are a lot of regional and smaller airports whose operating budgets will not allow them to install, let's say, comprehensive systems which monitor protocols which are VHF for voice radio, ADSB, ACARS communication, satellite communication, because it's gonna some other protocols from aerospace have been attacked. You need to monitor a lot of frequencies all at the same time with a lot of systems which have to work every single time. So it's normally a cost problem.
So usually we don't have it right
now.
Yeah,
we do not have it.
Okay. Thank you.
Normally, the solution that the military uses is that you have a radar that looks around in the air, and if something is in the air, we should not explode it. But that is not practical for other areas of applications.